Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today we have a different kind of episode. It's one that I've been looking forward to for quite some time, and my guest today is a little different from the normal guest we have. My guest today is Jay Mohr, actor, comedian, writer, stand-up comic. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Brother Hank, long time coming, man. I love the work that you're doing, and you write a lot more than I do, and so do all the guests on your show. So I'm a bit of an outlier. I can only write about myself.
Well, I started thinking about this quite a while ago, and it seems like, if you have an actor or stand-up comic on, that may be a bit of an outlier, but in actuality, you are someone who has written material your whole life, and then you take that material, perform it, hone it once you've got feedback from the audience, and that, and so I really wanted to get that perspective on the show.
Interesting.
Yeah, we think of.
I never thought about it like that. Like, really, the audience is your editor. The deadline is right now, and they let you know in the moment, pass, fail. There's no bell curve. It's pass, fail, period. And that's really interesting. The audience is your editor right away at every show.
That's right. And we explore every aspect of creativity here on the show. And I just thought, man, what a phenomenal way to look at the creative process, because we think of writers as this kind of solitary profession that, you sit behind a desk and you pound out words and you hope that they connect with someone one day, and you really don't get feedback, but someone like you gets that feedback and then gets to mold it, and like you said, the audience is your editor. But I start every show with a variation of the same question, and it's always, how did you know you wanted to be a writer? But for you, you started stand-up very young. What was your first inclination that was a path that you wanted to go down, and something that fired you up and that you wanted to pursue?
I was always obsessed with stand-up comedy, Hank. If it was on television, I recorded it on those old VHS tapes. I think they were 3-4 hours long, and it was all like 7-minute chunks of guys on late-night talk shows doing stand-up comedy. Star Search, Evening at the Improv. I was always watching comedy, devouring comedy. I loved it. And there was a public access station in New Jersey where I grew up, and they broadcast on Saturday nights, the Comedy Club, the next town over. And then I always watched that. And then I was 16 years old in my living room watching that. And then they just had their own little public access commercial saying, if you're between the ages of 13 and 17 and think you're funny, we want to have a contest for teenage comedians. And I went, oh, okay. Now I know why I've been watching it so much. And then 3 to 5 minutes just seemed very easy. Writing it is easy, but when you perform it, you're performing at the speed of light. It comes out of your mouth in about 30 seconds, and then you stand there completely. The time-space continuum gets torn to shreds once you've plowed through your material in a minute and a half. But that was my first time, and then I guess really when it all sort of clicked was 17 years old. I drove to Buffalo, New York, 8 hours for $50 to open for a headliner. And I drove back, put my car in my father's car in the driveway, took a shower, and then I walked to school. And first period French class, I had a $50 bill in my pocket. And I was looking at all the kids, and I was wondering, I wonder what this kid has in his pocket for lunch. I wonder what this girl has for lunch, not $50. And then I looked at my French teacher, and I realized she doesn't have $50 in her pocket or in her purse. And then I went, oh, okay, no college for me. It's up and running, comedy full time.
Wow. So how long did it take you to put that first set together?
Well, the first one with the open mic for teenagers, that was put together in about a week and a half. And it was just weird stuff around the house that was just nonsense. But
observational
to
stuff?
go up, yeah, I used to wet the bed from the top of my dresser. Seinfeld-esque, like ice tongs, like who, one at a time. Who's using ice one at, like, I don't, like, weird stuff that didn't really have like a punch or a thread or a story.
Who's using the tongs?
What is the deal with ice tongs? Is anybody using one cube of ice? And why do they come in cubes? Are there 3 of them? No. But the stand-up that I'm doing now is an amalgamation of 28 years of doing stand-up comedy and collecting stories. And
your new album is amazing, by the way.
My wife wrote that album verbatim. It was like doing a Mammoth play. I had to do exactly word for word what she wrote. Because she's an insomniac, and she'll just hand me a notebook, and it'll be, the bit like about if you want to be a successful couple, you have to have similar hates, not similar interests, and
right.
The long bit about irony and Dateline ID and murder channels and murder shows and our cultural obsession with murder. It's always a white lady. She always gets killed by her husband, and she's always named Patty. And they always say she lit up a room. No, not really. I mean, she's on the show. That was all written by Nikki Cox. And so that was high anxiety recording that special in Santa Barbara at a theater, because the way she structured it, it was just a callback factory. It was the callback, like Everett's Happy and a Lot is the name of the album you're referring to.
Yeah.
And if I miss a sentence, I lose 7 minutes of material. Like, I can't bring it back. It won't make any sense because it's a callback,
That's awesome.
But what I'm doing on stage, as far as writing goes, it's really not now, 28 years in, because I've realized, and this is the big cheat and the big light at the end of the tunnel if you're a stand-up comic or a writer that writes stand-up comedy or comedy, that the funniest things in my act are things that have already happened to me.
Right.
And it's just a matter of time for that memory to pop up, like in a thought bubble about what my child said and tie it into something else. And so now it's not even writing as much as weaving. How do I weave this all together? How do I sustain? How do I keep all these fish, the audience members, in this giant net for an hour and a half, and nobody gets out? Nobody ever swims out of the net and comes back. Like, for an hour and a half, how do I thread and weave this together where nobody wants to even take a bathroom break at all? They can't get out of their chairs. That's the thrill now.
And it's the same skill set as a novelist who is able to weave chapter after chapter and leave the ending of one with a lead in to the next one, and constant callbacks like you talked about, and wanting to keep people anchored to their chair and turning page after page. It's a very similar skill set. It sounds like. Well, go ahead.
I've always admired, anybody that writes fiction to me is just a completely different breed of cat. And you and I were texting prior to this last week, and I was telling you how much I love Wally Lamb, and that, just to create these worlds and create these people, like even something as modern as Gone Girl, which I think is pretty exceptional because she switches and protagonists throughout the entire book. It's from his side, her side. So as a reader, you keep switching who you're siding with depending on where the narrative is coming from. So they blow my mind. Anybody that writes fiction, I don't know how they do it. How do you pick the name of the town, the color of the car, the rain, the bit? Like, there's so many details. I don't have that in me. I'd rather just go, hey, I was on Saturday Night Live, and this is what happened.
Yeah. But you have written a couple of books, and we're going to get into those shortly. But Saturday Night Live, how did you go from teen stand-up to being on the biggest comedy show that there is?
Repetition. It's really how I've gotten anything my entire life, and how I think most stand-up comics and most, I'm not calling myself a successful person, but I would assume most successful people, it's just repetition. And if you do stand-up comedy at the level and the bar that you set for yourself and exceed that bar and then set a new bar and keep going and going and repetition, eventually you get noticed no matter what your job is. And if you write and you keep writing and writing, and people in repetition, you just write every day, write. And you know, guys, I'll come back to Saturday Night Live after the detour, but you know, there's guys like Henry Rollins was lead singer of Black Flag, but he's got some of the greatest poetry about love that's up there with like E.E. Cummings and Anne Sexton. It's, you know, love heals scars, love left. Like, these are incredibly quotable, beautiful things from a guy that was the lead singer of a punk band. And I asked him when he was on my podcast, and he said, repetition every day. Even if I just write, I have nothing to write, I do it every day. So doing stand-up comedy and doing it every night, Monday to every single night, doing one, if not two or three shows, eventually an opportunity presents itself, and that's what happened. Is I had a manager who ran a comedy club in Greenwich Village, and he told me that they were going to have Saturday Night Live auditions, and being his client, I was assured a spot on that lineup. I went on third. The air conditioning went out. It was July in New York City, and everybody from Saturday Night Live left after the fourth comic. So it's also just the nature of the universe and the matrix, the giant grid that we're operating on. Like, if I'd gone on 6, nobody ever would have seen me, and I would not have gone on Saturday Night Live. But it was doing stand-up at a comedy club, doing what I did all the time, over and over and over again. But this time it was for the marbles. It was for that job.
That's crazy. And yeah, I think there are two things that matter a lot when you're trying to find success, whether it's doing what you do or doing what I do. One of them is to get a lucky break, and the other thing is to show up every single day. And like you said, repetition, keep doing what you're doing. You know, and even Henry Rollins, you know, got a lucky break with Black Flag, but then he, you know, kept plugging at it. And it seems like a really humble dude, which is, you know, I guess that just proves that most people are dichotomies and complex people.
Yeah, Henry's very humble, incredibly complex, incredibly private. Like, when he leaves my garage, he just vanishes into the ether. There's no like, hey, I'll text you later. Like, hey, what's your number? It's like an understanding when Henry shows up that, you know, and he's a great guy. He can carry the conversation. He's an exceptional speaker. Everybody knows. But yeah, he is a mysterious guy and an exceptional writer. But I just kept doing stand-up I never. The thing is, once you do the audition for Saturday Night Live, they say, hey, we think you're great. Now we need you to hand in sketches. That's where the whammy comes in, because I don't know what a sketch is. I don't know how long it's supposed to be. Do I put Phil Hartman's name, or do I put the name of who he plays in the sketch? Do I write left to right? Do I write up and down? I don't even know what direction you write. Like, honestly, no idea ever. And I was panic-stricken. And I was at the comedy club where my audition was a couple weeks after the fact. And nothing's worse than somebody with the world by the horns complaining. And you're talking to other comedians that did not get to go on in front of Saturday Night Live and complaining. Like, I don't know how to write a sketch. And I was saying this to all my friends. And my dear friend, John DiMaggio, who I'm still friends with, and now he's a voiceover actor, he's an enormous guy. He picked me up off my feet, Hank. I was wearing a denim jacket. He actually picked me up off my feet and said, dude, shut up. Go home, smoke a joint, wait an hour, and make believe you know how to write a sketch. We're done. And he set me down. That's what I did. I wrote a couple commercial parodies and a few sketches. They were terrible, but had he not just grabbed me and shook me, I'd probably still be complaining about how I did not get better than that.
Didn't you have John on your show recently? Maybe it was a replay.
No, on the podcast, I have him on all the time. John DiMaggio is the voice, for the listener, of Bender the Robot on Futurama, Jake the Dog and Adventure Time, so like Travel.com, like all these things he does. And he is the guy that I've probably known the longest. Out of all the comedians that have ever been on my podcast, I go back like 1990. Me and John DiMaggio were doing shows together, so
Wow.
there's a lot of history there. If you want to know what it was like to be 20 years old, smoking a ton of grass in Manhattan with comics, you're definitely going to want to listen to the John DiMaggio episodes of More Stories, because we still act that way even though we don't do any of that stuff anymore.
That's right. Jay Mohr, your website is jmohr.com, where you can listen to More Stories, which is a hugely successful podcast, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But just for the show that we're referencing here is More Stories podcast. And Jay,
I'm
there's
proud of it. The overhead is zero. I do it from a card table in my garage, Hank. You got way too much overhead with the Skyping and the calls, and
oh man,
your website is pretty elaborate. I'm telling you, bro, get yourself a podcast. You got to do this at a card table in your garage. I'm like a Dominican guy in the East Village, you know, without the dominoes.
Without the dominoes, sure. You've got a set of dominoes in there. Go ahead and admit it.
And you know what? I don't. You know, honestly, I always wanted to, because I thought it'd be so much fun when people bang them on the table. But I can't. I'm so bad at math. I can't add that quick to be any good at all with dominoes.
Well,
like when I see numbers, I blank.
Well, somebody should use the Amazon banner and go buy you a set of dominoes for your podcast studio.
You're hilarious. Yeah, go to jmohr.com and use the Amazon banner and buy whatever you want, and email me what you bought.
That's right.
I'll read it on my podcast. Make you a star for your friends that listen.
Oh, Jay.
For the listener, not to you.
Right. Another topic that comes up from time to time on the show is dealing with criticism, and this is something that writers deal with. You've got this project that you're working on. You've dreamed about it forever. You've put your blood, sweat, and tears in it. You poured your guts out. You put this book together. You put this blog post together. Whatever it is that you're working on, and then you send it to people, and people reject you. I can only imagine what that's like in a very real, tangible sense for a stand-up comic who works on this material, gets the beats down, gets the timing, and then you deliver it to people, and either they don't laugh or they boo you. What is it like to deal with that, and then how do you show up the next night to do it again? And what is it that is miswired in us that won't
arrogance?
I guess it is, because
in my case it's complete narcissism and arrogance. I'm not even joking. And it's Dustin Hoffman said that I saw him in the actor studio, and he kept trying to get into the existential conversations with Marathon Man. I'm drawing a blank on the other Sir, you'll fill in the blank for me. At one point, is it safe? The dentist and the Marathon Man. And he keeps saying, what is it? Why are we in show business? And the guy just stood up and looked at Dustin Hoffman and said, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's why. That's the only reason we're in show business. And as far as failure goes and rejection, what's weird, and I think this is where comedy and writing actually do tie together. The more you do it, the better you become at it. So your rejection is really front-loaded. Like
Right.
If you're a new writer, you get hammered. And if you're a new comic, you're only using 5% of what your potential is as far as doing stand-up comedy is. But there's still something there that people say, I don't know, I see something. Have them come back. Let's do it again. But how I handle it, to go back to your question about rejection, is A, not well. B, I'm getting better at it. But I also have a very definitive line in my brain. If you are, say, an editor, and you have a criticism to me in my book, one of my two books, about structure, because that's the way books go,
Right.
I'm all ears. But if you ever, and I've had this with many, many network executives, the moment you tell me how comedy goes, I'm not listening. I'm gone. I would rather go down. I'll rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. I'll throw them overboard myself. But if you're criticizing me and that's what your area of expertise is, I'm okay. In fact, I like it a lot because I can only get better and reap the benefits of the criticism.
Right.
But if you're going way out of your lane and saying, you know, it'd be funnier, then no, you lost me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Do you see that happening with comics and maybe TV writers or film writers, where people that maybe don't have that level of confidence allow other people to shape their voice in a way that they
Of course.
didn't
That's why
want
they're
it?
TV writers, and that's why they're not TV actors, I would say.
Gotcha.
Just TV writers, you know, it's a big room full of people, and everybody throws ideas around. And I mean, I learned on Saturday Night Live, if I was in the room and TV writers, they're better at what they do than anything I do. So I'm certainly not, I didn't want that to sound like I was putting them down or anything, but to be a performer, you have to have just a completely out of whack sense of arrogance and narcissism. Otherwise, everybody says comics are so depressed and they're so, you know what? I'm not buying into that anymore, Hank. We've heard that our whole lives.
Yeah.
You can't be that miserable to get up and go in front of strangers and make them laugh all the time, you know? But I learned on Saturday Night Live, if I was in a room when a sketch was being written, and I said, or his name could be Hank, and they changed the name to Hank, my initials were on the sketch just for the word Hank. And I went, oh, wow, this is really weird. Like, guys are kind of gravy training all over the place over here. I got to get in some more rooms. So I do rejection well if it's coming from their business. I will have a radio show. If my program director tells me about the clock and how I'm hurting affiliates if I go over my time,
right,
then I want to make it right. I want to be better at it. But the moment they tell me, hey, you know what you guys should do for the content of the show, then I just tune them out. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. And I think writers listening to this, if you have a story and you show it to somebody and they tell you, you know, it might be better, certainly listen, but you know in your heart and in your bones what you want to write, what's inside you that you have to get out onto the page or into the computer. Don't let anybody take you off of that. That's the concession that you are not allowed to make to yourself. You can't wake up knowing you made that concession.
Right. Because that's
my opinion.
Well, yeah, and it's a slippery slope. Once you start, giving in here or there, then that fire in your belly that you started with becomes, something else, and then you're not what you set out to be.
And the thing with stand-up is the rejection. Like I said, it's so front-loaded. Like your first 10 years doing stand-up, you get heckled and people are yelling. Nobody's there to see you. They're just there because it's comedy night. Now, 28 years in, if I go do a theater, the Majestic Theater in San Antonio, the Taft Theater in Cincinnati, or what, like, they're all there to see me. They already think I'm funny. They have my sense of humor. They've listened to my podcast. They've read my books. They've seen my stand-up before. They've seen my specials. So nobody heckles because they're all... It would be completely bizarre to go to, you wouldn't go to, like, your favorite concert and tell them, like, play something else. So you really get let off the hook the longer you're in the mix.
Well, and also you get a deeper pool of things to pull from, don't you? I think the same as with writers. When you were saying earlier that how novelists just dream stuff up. Most of that is from life experiences that get kind of molded and twisted, and writers can say all they want that, well, this is not me. That's bullcrap. A lot of the things that we write are us, and they're turned and they're massaged and things like that. But it all is kind of a part of you that comes out.
It's really interesting because it seems like what you're explaining to me with writers is what Bob Newhart wrote about comics, and that is we're just wired to see odd things and file it away. Like, for some reason, a book being, I don't know, upside down on a bookshelf. You just file that away, or the name of a strange car. I remember in Bob Newhart's book, I Shouldn't Even Be Doing This, he said, he just, like, a trucking company went by, and it was just the name of I forget the name, but it was like, Carl Plunder moving, and like, so he would just use that. 15 years later, it would pop up, and he would use it. So it seems like what you're saying is that's what writers do, and I did not know that. You just file weird things away and use them later.
Oh yeah, and sitting at restaurants and overhearing conversations. Sometimes there'll be a word or a phrase that kind of sticks in your mind, but sometimes it's just the cadence of conversation, the cadence of dialogue that kind of brings out emotion and things like that. That's is all part of the palette, And I would imagine for stand up, it's kind of similar to that. Especially for observational stand up, where you're.
Oh, absolutely. But I want to ask you about that cadence and pattern. As a writer, can you write trying to copy a certain type of cadence and pattern? Does that have sustainability, or eventually does it circle back to who you are, and that is eventually what comes out on the page? Or I'm asking you, Hank, are there writers, because I honestly don't know, actually set out to write in a certain cadence and pattern and time and pull it off?
I don't know that you set out to do it, but when you're getting in your characters' heads, those kind of patterns and flow of dialogue kind of start to come out as your character takes form. It's kind of hard to put in words, but no, I don't think you set out to do it. But I think as you discover your characters, especially, characters come out in dialogue. That's why, the old adage of show don't tell. Instead of, talking about, what's going on in the room, have that come out in the dialogue. So that I don't know that you set out to do it necessarily, but you can, if you read a novel, you can read where the dialogue is very stilted and it's not believable, and then you notice every dialogue tag at the end of he said, she said, this sort of thing, and then when you read good dialogue, it's like you're 4 pages in and you don't even catch those things. It just flows, and it just feels like real people sitting in front of you talking. And I don't know that that's something that you can really craft or you can learn. It's just I think personally it comes from lots of observation, paying attention to people, listening to people. I think some of the best writers are the best listeners because they pick up on the way people say things without saying them. People rarely come out and say exactly what they mean, but there's lots of clues around what they say. So I think that's what makes a good dialogue writer for sure.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know any of that.
Well, that is for me anyway. And
have you ever written something and halfway through, or maybe, I don't know, 25 pages in, realized, oh, this isn't like me at all, and had to continue, soldier on? Or is it more of a riding a wave of like, oh, this isn't me at all, this is really exciting, let me keep going?
Yes. To both of those things. Sometimes you write a character and it's just like, this is not believable, this is not what someone would do, and you go back and you start over and you try to say, well, let me figure this character out a little more because I don't believe this character yet. And then sometimes something just comes out of completely out of left field, that spark of creativity that we can't explain, and you're just following behind, writing down what you see happening. It's really kind of this weird ethereal thing.
I loved your answer. Yes, I'm there with you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's and it's.
Should I hit the ball to left field or right field? Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Little hat tip to Yogi Berra for
the best.
The yogi-isms that that the longer you ponder them, the more true they become.
It's funny, the Yogi Berra stuff, they're winding up in like Buddhist quote books. I noticed
I
about
know, it's
10
crazy.
years ago, I had like the Everyday Buddhist, and it gets late early out there. There's all these weird Yogi Berra quotes that are actually kind of brilliant. My favorite one that I apply to stand-up comedy is if people attendance was low apparently at the end of his career, and he said if people don't want to come, we can't stop them.
Right.
And I always thought that was brilliant, like, because I stress out over these ticket sales, and I do all the radio that I can do, and at some point you have to let go, you know. And it's for the writers, I guess it's the same. At some point you just got to hit that send button and get that manuscript to somebody, and that's that.
That's right. And I heard you mention that on More Stories today, that particular Yogi Berra quote, and I loved it. But you're right. You know, I was talking with a writer friend of mine a couple of weeks ago on the show, and he was talking about the struggle that he had to get his first sale, and that everywhere he turned, he was just rejected. And then he just gave up and said, you know, I'm just not going to do this anymore. But then the strange thing happened that that when he gave up, then another story idea came, and he's like, well, I've got to write this because I've got this idea, but I'm not going to put the stress on it of, you know, this being my career. And that was the story that broke his career. So it's,
and he probably wrote what he wanted to write, and he wasn't concerned about what other people thought.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
This is the first time I've done a podcast while grocery shopping. This is fantastic. It should all be this simple. This is great, Hank. Thank you. This is cool.
Welcome. Could you get me a box of Cocoa Puffs while you're there?
No, I got kids. I can't have that sugary cereal in my house, but I'll tell you what, I got a whole bunch of bananas and apples, and I won't make you eat the skin of the apple. I don't care.
I actually love the skin of the apple, so, you know.
All right, then I won't peel it for you.
I have kids, too, so we don't have that crap in the house either. But anyway. So you wrote a book, a memoir, if you will, about your time at SNL. What was the what was the genesis for that book? How did that come about?
Well, I kept seeing books about SNL written by people that were not at SNL.
Oh.
And the things that had happened to me while I was there, obviously there's the stories about, you know, there's the Chris Farley stories and Adam Sandler. There's great stories, but nobody knows. This is what happens Monday. You meet the host on Monday. Tuesday, nobody knows that. And I thought, wow, like everybody knows, you know, 100-yard football field, 3 tries to get 10 yards, and then they reset it, and 90 feet to first base from home plate, and books are like this, and there's a front and a back. This is called the spine. Nobody knew formulaically how Saturday Night Live went. Nobody knew when the host arrives. When do you meet them? When are you writing? Is it really that crazy? And I was asked these questions everywhere I went about Saturday Night Live, and I thought, and they were all different. Everybody had a different thing that they needed to know about this show. So I realized, you know, it's been about 6 years, and I've answered all these different questions. I think this is a book. And then when I realized that the other books out there about Saturday Night Live were not first-person accounts, it was reporters and oral histories, etc., I thought, I'll actually be the first person ever to say, no, I was there. This is how it actually works. Everybody gets along fine. No, it's not cutthroat or crazy. It's all about time, what fits in 90 minutes. How does update work? How do you get on the update desk? Why does the monologue always stink? Because nobody ever wrote in a book. They don't do it until Saturday afternoon. It's just a back burner thing, and I still don't know why. The schedule is such because back in the day, they didn't know how long they were going to be on the air. Everybody was kind of juiced up on maybe some extracurricular vitamins. And but it's the same schedule today, even though everybody's square. But you just burn the midnight oil, you go like hell, and then you repeat. And then you get a week off, and you come back, you do it again, and it's only a 20-week season, and you get out of there. So I really wanted to write. And look, let's not BS each other. I wanted somebody to give me money to write a book. Once I realized, oh wow, I could do this, and the way I've been telling stories on stage, I could probably get them to the written page. Will somebody give me an advance? And once I was told I could get an advance, that'll get you writing in a hurry.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Deadlines
are
then
amazing.
It became, yeah, and it's like, wow, so then it really became, once I had, that book was Hyperion, and Will Schweibel was running Hyperion. He was my guy at Hyperion. Once I had that commitment from them, that's all you want in show business, is somebody to say, I see you, I validate you, let's do this together, whether it's a director, an audience. In this case, it was an editor, and they said, yeah, let's definitely do this, and then you just want to impress them. So then it becomes, time sort of slows down. Instead of it being that mad dash, I got to get this done like I hear about writers doing, I actually had a luxury of time because I had so many stories that I had already told so many people that I couldn't wait to get down on the keyboard. And then it became really almost meditational of what the color of the carpet was. What was that smell? What did it always smell like? In this part of the offices, why was nobody ever in this area? What was in that area on the 17th floor of 30 Rockefeller Center? I never went back there. Why did I never go back there? What was this person like? What was that person like? So actually super lucky. I get super nostalgic, and memories get triggered with me, with a lot of people really, with music. And my 2 years on Saturday Night Live was the best 2 years of music on that show ever. My first show was Nirvana, and then it was Aerosmith, and then it was Eric Clapton, it was Bonnie Raitt, it was Smashing Pumpkins, just one after the other. So
that's crazy.
I would listen to those albums and remember that week, and it would just come to me that way, because I remember these bands were coming and the excitement of all of it, and that kept the excitement in my mind, in my body, and my fingertips. As I was typing, I was getting really excited about these stories.
Wow, that's really cool. I listen to music when I write. A lot of writers say they have to have perfect silence and that sort of thing. But I create playlists depending on the book I'm working on at the time, and because those things trigger emotions in me and memories and things like that. That's great to hear that you do that as well, and that brought up those things to you. That's a really cool testament to the power of music in the creative process as well.
I'm glad you do it too.
Yeah. So
we'll trade playlists one day.
Absolutely, we'll do that. So not only did you talk about the kind of the inner workings of SNL, but that book, Gasping for Airtime, that we're talking about, 2 years in the trenches of Saturday Night Live, was also deeply personal for you. You got into some pretty heavy, personal accounts then too. What was that decision like to say, okay, I'm going to go all in with this book and I'm going to tell the whole story?
Well, I realized early on as I was writing that the antagonist of most of my stories was me.
Right.
I was the one with the monkey wrench. I was the one drinking too much booze. I was the one having panic attacks, not anxiety, and I explain it a lot in the book, Gasping for Airtime. I felt like, it's kind of like when you're writing, you know this more than I do because you're an actual writer. I'm a comic that just writes about himself. But like, I would assume when you're writing, you just get these happy, like, trapdoors, like the Winchester Mystery House. As I'm writing a book about Saturday Night Live, I realized, I can explain exactly what a panic attack is like, and the difference between anxiety and panic, and how I went to my doctor and got treated, and how things were mid-panic, the time I was in a sketch with panic, how I felt after I was medicated and came back. So that was like a happy accident. I never had intended on writing about my panic disorder, but it became important as I was writing to really do a honest history, my history of Saturday Night Live, I had to explain that I was freaking out. I had like a chemical problem.
And the book was very well received. Did you get any comments from other people that you talked about in the book, good or bad, when you released it?
Amazingly, and classic to my actual 2 years on Saturday Night Live, no, none, zero. I saw Adam Sandler at a Clipper game once. I was with my oldest boy when he was about 3 years old, holding him in my arms. I went down to say hi to Adam Sandler. He sort of looked over his shoulder at me and said, "Hey, I heard you talked a lot of trash about me in your book." But I didn't. So it was just secondhand, so I knew he didn't read it.
Right.
And then the only other Saturday Night Live alum that ever spoke to me about it was I saw Rachel Dratch at the Sundance Film Festival, and she had been on the show about 2 years. And she said she read my book before she went on. Oh, I'm sorry. And Brooks Wheelan said he read my book before he went on too.
Cool. So you followed up that book.
It's not a primer. If you read that book, you're
right.
not ready for what's waiting for you because everybody's so different and everybody. I was a comic. I'm so used to being the center of attention. Now to write sketches at 2:00 in the morning and walk around asking others for help and where do I put this when I'm done, and I didn't know how computers worked. I was writing it out by hand, but where do I put it? And everybody's busy with their own thing, so they're just kind of pointing their arm. Everybody just points and wait, like, yeah, over there, and mumbles. So, if you have written at Harvard and you know how to send a Word document to somebody, it'll be easier for you there than it was for me.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't know where the bathrooms were, for crying out loud.
You followed up gasping for airtime a few years later with another book called No Wonder My Parents Drank, Tales from a Stand-Up Dad. What was the creative process like? How was it different for this book than it was for the first book?
Well, I had my wife, the beautiful Nikki Cox, and one cross-country flight, I was asleep. I was doing the show Gary Unmarried, the TV show Gary Unmarried.
Right.
And I woke up on the airplane to use the restroom, and my wife handed me a notebook with the foreword of that. She went on to write about 3 or 4 chapters of that book. And I made a point to not change anything that she wrote because I wanted her, she has very low self-esteem, inexplicably, to realize these words that you wrote are the ones people are complimenting me in this book. So I didn't change a word, a syllable, a comma, nothing. So I woke up on an airplane, LAX to JFK or vice versa, and she handed me a notebook that was filled, single-spaced, and it was the foreword comparing Parenthood to the circus. There's weird smells. I'm not going to do it. Right. And one day the circus leaves town, and you miss it, and you miss that smell, and you miss the lines, and you miss the sticky hands, and all that. And it's this beautiful forward that became an actual chapter, and I almost cried on the airplane. And I first of all, I couldn't believe that somebody just handed me a full chapter. I didn't have to do that much work, but what she wrote was so beautiful, and I don't know if I would be as solicitous with my time if the roles were reversed and she had to write a book about being on Las Vegas or the TV show Nikki or on Happily Ever After or the Norm Show. And I asked her, what made you do this? And my schedule at the time was really crazy, full stand-up schedule, Gary Unmarried, and this book deadline. And she said, well, I can't do stand-up. I can't be Gary because I'm not Gary and Gary Unmarried.
Right.
So maybe this will alleviate the stress that is your schedule right now. So just her altruism that the most tender pieces of this book are hers. give to their sons and to their fathers at the back of the book, which I think is a vital, vital quiz that you must make your child and your father take. Because, Hank, the answers will astound you. When I gave the quiz that my wife put in the book to my father,
Yeah.
the answers my father gave me back made me cry.
Wow.
And when I gave it to my son, it made me actually cry. Not like crying, actual crying, because you see the world through your head and your brain and your eyes, and you don't really know how people feel about you or think about you, but your connection to your father and your connection to your children and your mother, it's your take on it is not their take on it. They have a very different relationship with you than you have with them. It's two completely separate realities. And my father, I always thought, and I know now in hindsight that my wife was incredibly brilliant and strategic, and she knew I needed this from my father. That's why it's in the book. But it has served others well. And my father was never very effusive with his love and praise and I love yous, and he wasn't mean at all. He wasn't a hitter. He wasn't a yeller. He just liked his books. And I always got the feeling that I was just kind of bothering him all the time, you know? And then one of the questions is, what's the greatest joy, what's the greatest part about having a son? And my father's answer was ease. And I just started crying, like I was ease? I thought you didn't like me.
Oh, wow.
But his answer was the ease. And what do you want to do differently from your father? And my father's answer was to be more expressive and show love. That was my father's answer, but that was my biggest complaint about my father. And I realized my father is giving it everything he has, and every single person listening to this, your mom and your dad, if you're not happy with the way they behave towards you, they're giving you everything they have. They're not saving it for a rainy day. When you were born, it was the greatest moment of their life. And you were this miracle, all the stars in the heavens, and every sunset and rise and the tides and the earth and the flowers and every hummingbird and piece of cotton candy manifested itself into this little onesie. And it was you, and they stared at you, and they couldn't believe you, the majesty and the beauty and the miracle of you. And we forget as we enter our 30s and our 40s, they still see us that way. That doesn't change. But something gets lost in the translation, in the dialogue between fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. And we need to remind ourselves, and when you have children, it really puts a spotlight on it, because you know how you feel about your children.
Right.
That's how they felt about you. So
you can say that you're not a writer all you want, but that was very beautifully put.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, on the surface, it seems like this book is kind of more lighthearted than the first book, but it sounds like that you really delve into some really deep territory.
Yeah, in the first book, the Saturday Night Live book, Gasping for Airtime, I'm very open about drinking too much, realizing I'm an alcoholic, panic disorder, as I told you earlier, which I live with. I met the right doctor. It's in the book, so I can say it on a podcast. I had a panic attack so bad at work, and panic, people will say to me like, yeah, I think I had a panic. If you think it, you don't.
Right.
Because panic is so consuming. It's a house on fire that you have to get out of. It's the release of adrenaline and endorphins in your body at life-saving levels for no reason. Wow. Where anxiety is stimulus response. Your boss is a jerk, and you feel like you're underpaid, so every day when you drive to that building, you start to get a little anxiety. That's different. Panic is when your body feels like it needs to save its life. But you're just standing in a writer's room with your back against the wall, and you don't know why everybody else doesn't realize that everything's burning around them, and you're the only one that feels this way. So you run home 55 blocks because you're dying. You go to the emergency room because you are having a heart. I don't think. I just took my pulse. It's 200, and I'm sitting on the toilet. So why would my pulse be 200? So I felt it was very important and necessary to write a lot about panic. And I was super lucky that I caught it early, and I went to a great doctor because I had my panic attack. I ran home from 30 Rock to my apartment, which was 50 blocks. I ran, which is great. If you think you're having a heart attack, go for a nice sprint.
Right.
And I had Valium in that. I had like 2 Valium just like laying around. I called my mother, who's a nurse, and I told her that what was happening. She said, just take one. Take one now and get in the tub. And then about a half hour went by, and I started to feel better. And the feeling of normal it transcended into euphoric because it wasn't dying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
The chart is rearranged when you have panic. So having normalcy becomes euphoric. So then I took a cab back to Saturday Night Live, and I had to tell everybody what just happened to me. And right now I just feel so great. I'm so groovy. Like when you first start drinking as a kid and you get a buzz, you tell everybody, oh, I'm kind of wasted. You can't not say it because it's such a weird new sensation.
Right.
And I said it to Sarah Silverman, and Sarah Silverman said, you had a panic attack. You have to see Save My Life. And she gave me Dr. Noel Taylor's number. I left her a message. She called me back at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
She agreed to see me on a Sunday. She prescribed me a drug called Klonopin. I take 1 milligram in the morning, 1 milligram at night since 1993 until today. Caught it early, and you can deal with it. And the thing is as guys, we think it's very manly to deal with things on our own. We like to fix things. But if anybody listens to your podcast that has depression or can't stop drinking or using drugs, or if you have panic, I assure you, and I've been through it, nothing in your life will be more manly than saying, I need help to another man. That is the manliest thing you will do in your timeline of life, including for children. When you as a grown man completely surrender and reach out to another human being and say, I need help. I'm not well.
Yeah.
I need help. That is manly. That is manly.
Yeah.
And I went in through a side door because I was bragging to everybody about how great I felt with this Valium in my body that I'd never taken one before. And I was like, hey, everything's kind of groovy. This is great. I'm going to go back up to work, watch the band. This will be fun. I feel normal, euphoric. And Sarah Silverman was the one that identified what had happened to me. And Dr. Noel Taylor prescribed my medication and saved my life. And what was great about Dr. Taylor was I saw her a week after she prescribed the Klonopin, and I no longer woke up with that cloud approaching. It's only a matter of time before all hell breaks loose when you have panic. And I didn't have it. I just woke up like I used to wake up as a kid. So when I saw her a week later, she said, so how's the medication working? I said, it's incredible. And she goes, all right, so call me for refills. When you run out, don't take more than you need because it's a, class 3, some medical terms where if you abuse it, they take it away. And I asked her, so what time next week? Because all I know about psychiatrists and psychopharmacologists is New Yorker cartoons and people are lying on a couch, right?
Right.
She didn't have a couch. She had a chair, and I was kind of bummed out. Like, I wanted to lay down, tell her all my problems. And she said, why would you come back next week? I said, well, you're a psychiatrist. And she said, I don't want to get into this is what she said. I don't want to get into an archaeological dig. I don't care about your childhood. You have a sickness, and we found the treatment. If you had asthma and I gave you an inhaler, we wouldn't talk about your relationship with your parents and how you were. We have this.
Right.
We're good. Get out of my office.
It doesn't matter if you're a bedwetter or not.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's great. Jay,
She
when
said it's a neurological glitch. She said some people get asthma, some people are allergic to bees, and she had the physician's desk reference on the walls behind her. She said, "I have the PDR behind me in 16 different languages. I can show you panic disorder in all of them if it'll make you feel any better. I'm not interested in your childhood. If
wow,
this medication begins to not work, then you can come see me and we can figure something else out. But it looks like we caught it. You know, if you had bronchitis, I'd give you an antibiotic, and that's that."
right, wow. And yeah, there's nothing like you said more manly than asking for help. Uh, and you talk about working with your wife a lot. You guys seem to have a great creative um, relationship, and where you kind of play off of one another. Would you like to speak about that for just a minute? About how important that is to have that's not only a support system, but someone who um, you know plays
Uh,
into you creatively and feeds that thing.
well, it's interesting because it's not very collaborative because she writes in my voice and she's always right. So if I say, no, I should say this here, she says, no, no, no. It goes like, it's like David Mamet. She says, no, it goes like this. And she's right. And she'll write stand-up comedy in my voice, but she makes me smarter. Like I wouldn't think to use a word on a run-on sentence. I wouldn't slip incongruous in the middle, you know, but that's how she speaks all the time because she's an actual genius. So she writes the way I would write, but smarter. So I don't want to correct or change anything. So it's not really collaborative. When she writes something, I can't wait to say it because A, it's hilarious, and B, people think I'm smarter than I am because I'm saying her words. But it's incredible to have that luxury of somebody handing you a notebook of material that is ready to go. Like you don't have to try it out. It is ready to go. And I was on Adam Carolla's podcast a couple weeks ago, and he said, "So why do you keep doing your wife's material?" And nobody ever put it to me that way before. I said, "Well, it's not her material; it's my material." He goes, "But she wrote it. Why didn't she go on stage and do it?" I said, "Well, I don't think my wife wants to, you know, after 20 since she was 8 years old, she's been on television. I don't think my wife wants to say, 'Hey, what's your name? Where you from? How you guys doing tonight?' and start there. I think she'd be better suited writing for Esquire, Vanity Fair, GQ.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting your foot in the door. But I know if she did have that opportunity, she'd be astounding at it. And whoever hired her or will hire her is getting the best writer I've ever known."
That's awesome. Jay, when we were texting last week, you mentioned that you felt like you had another book in you. Would you like to talk about that at all, or are you gonna
Yeah,
save that?
it's like, nah, I feel like the more I talk about it, the more I'm obligated to get going at some point. um, I want to write a book, a comedy book about. I converted to Catholicism late in life, not because my wife is Catholic, but because I had a lot of strange things happen to me, and I felt like I had a calling. So I converted. I was raised Christian. I was raised Presbyterian, but Catholic. I went to a Catholic funeral. I was asked to be somebody's pallbearer that I sort knew, sort of, but the man had a lot of sons. It was my wife's uncle's son. He asked me to be a pallbearer at his wife's funeral, and that was a big responsibility and a very odd request to me because I didn't know that type of stuff, pallbearing and whatnot. So, hey, I'm back.
Hey, I'm sorry,
So,
it just dropped out.
no. I tried to go to my house, but there's no connections in my house, so I'm pulling back out into the street. So what happened was the dialogue was open. The door to dialogue was open, and it fascinated me because it was Catholic and it was Catholicism, which I've always been told is so. My whole life, it's like, man, these people are so rigid and nutty.
Yeah.
My wife told me, you should go to a mass at St. Monica's and see if you like it. So I said, okay, and I went to the mass at St. Monica's, and that's where my wife was baptized. is the love of my life, my soulmate. She was baptized here. I'm going to give it a shot. The sign above the door said, Hank, all are welcome.
I love it.
Okay, like it just they keep calling, like it's railroad ties in front of a train. Like it just kind of, the more I kept moving forward, the more they just kept laying railroad ties in front of me, but neither one of us knew it. So there's a higher thing working to me. I'm not trying to convert anybody. That's your business. This is my business.
Right.
This is my personal thing. I walked in and I was struck by how many gay people were in this church, and how many homeless people were in this church. And Maria Shriver was in this church, and Tom Brady was in this church, and another homeless person with a baby carriage with puppies in it, and a gay couple holding hands. And this was the weirdest motley crew of people worshiping Christ ever assembled, but apparently they go there all the time. Wow. And again, I kept telling you, calling. I felt like, I told my wife, I feel like I'm having a calling. And Monsignor Torgerson did the homily that day, the one I went to, my first Mass ever. And the Monsignor doing the Mass is rare. It's usually a priest. The Monsignor's kind of the big shot. And if he does one, it's Easter or like a high holiday or something. But he just did it this day that I was there. He walked out. He looked around. And the first words out of his mouth was, "We are a called people. We are a called upon people."
Wow.
And I just got goosebumps, and I tried to not cry in the pew. Did he read my file? How does that happen? So from there, I told my wife what had happened. And she said, "Wait, Monsignor Torgerson did the..." I go, "Yeah, I don't know how that all works, but yes, that's who did it." And then my wife and I together started going to RCIA classes to begin the transition into Catholicism and First Communion. And the conversations in those RCIA classes were so open and so beautiful. Like, is there a hell? And I remember Monsignor Torgerson came into our RCIA class one late Tuesday night. And my wife looked at Monsignor Torgerson, who buried Chris Farley and married Tom Brady. He's kind of a rock star in Western Los Angeles.
Yeah.
She said, "Monsignor," and he taught her as a little girl. She said, "Monsignor, do you believe in hell?" He was in the classroom already, but he walks further and he sits down next to my wife, 2 seats from me, takes his glasses off, rubs his face, and then he looks up and says, my God's bigger than that. I don't. And I thought, you're not supposed to say that. That's not the company line. And I've been on many right-wing shows. I've been on many Christian websites and radio shows, speaking very openly about my faith. And then the subsequent emails at jaymohr.com come in of, "You're a cafeteria Catholic," to which I reply, "Yeah, great. Thank you. That's great." Because I think if you accept anything as the word, capital T, capital W, that's just not realistic. Like, if we started writing about the Revolutionary War now, like today is when we start putting pen to paper about the Revolutionary War, that's how much time had elapsed from the life of Christ to the time the Gospels were written. So things are going to get lost in translation. It's been translated, obviously, So the fact that this particular church and these men that I speak to, about the Episcopalian Church in Newark, New Jersey, John Shelby Spong wrote a great book, Saving the Bible from Fundamentalism. Jim Lasante, the Monsignor of Our Lady of Lourdes, I asked him if he was pro-gay because he's always on Fox News. And he said, "Of course I'm pro-gay." And I said, "Well, how do you write that with your boss, the Pope?" And he said, "If you are pro-life, you have to be pro-life from conception through natural death. That includes gay people that are alive. You can't be against homosexuality if you're pro-life because they are indeed alive in front of you." And that's like, these are the most amazing group of men and thinkers that I've ever been around. And it made me think of what it's like when we talk about, Dorothy Parker and where they all hung out and spoke and talked at that table. And, when you think about these great philosophers of the old days, and I realized No, it's happening right now. Right now, Christians are having dialogue. You cannot escape the fact someone in your family is gay. You cannot show me a sentence from the Bible and have that person shunned. I'm sorry, I'm in show business. I know too many. I wouldn't have any friends.
Right.
And I don't think I'm going to hell if I'm a Jew because I ate shellfish because it says it in Leviticus. But right now there's this revolution, this beautiful revolution with love and openness and inclusion that's happening in conjunction and at the same time with science. Where scientists used to say, I don't believe in God, I'm a scientist. Now many scientists, of course I believe in God, I'm a scientist. So
Right.
that excites me. And I don't know if anybody's really, I know a lot of people have written about their faith, and it gets a little precious at times. And you really turn people off if you start talking and writing about your faith. But then this book's not for them, because I'm not trying to convert anyone. I want people to know this happened to me. Things that are so out of my realm of understanding have happened to me. Yeah, it might be chalked up to complete randomness, but I don't know how you extinguish thought. I don't know how you extinguish love, the love that you felt. We talked about, like, when you write, it triggers something. If you listen to a certain song, that emotion, I don't know how you extinguish the human soul. I don't believe that we just go. There has to be another level, and I wanted to write about that, but as a comic, because being a Christian in show business is like the new silent majority. And when you start talking about it, suddenly, I remember being on the set of Gary Unmarried and talking about it, and suddenly I realized there's like 11 people standing in a circle talking about books of the Bible. And it was, like they're just waiting for the call. They're waiting for the signal, like it's okay. When I went on Bill O'Reilly, all he wanted to do was hammer me about being a Hollywood pinhead, and I realized I can get this guy in my pocket. All I have to do is talk about St. Monica's in my face. And that's what I did. I could have had that guy would have sold Amway for me the second segment. Because I just kept going, well, I was just speaking with Father Tim. He's a young priest in my parish. He's 35 years old. We surf together. I'm not, so I want to write a book about my conversion to Catholicism and taking the books of the Bible and stories of the Bible. Is a very long answer, but with a comedic spin and tilt. Like, with Job, maybe God overdid it a little bit. At some point, maybe Job might have wanted to switch clubs. Maybe see what Satan's doing that week. I don't know, because God's kind of really pouring it on you, Job.
Yeah. Well, and
so I would like to, and I think the title of Priest in a Comic Walk Into a Bar would be perfect.
I love it. And wouldn't that be the? I know for me, and I have been on a spiritual journey of my own for quite a while, and there's some days that I believe more than others, and but what I do is I take my faith seriously, but not to the point, not preciously, like you talked about, and that's
well,
the
there
kind
has
of
to be discussion.
yeah.
If I want to know why, John 3:16, those who believe in Christ, the Son of God, will have everlasting life. Well, what about Jews? Jews aren't going to heaven. They don't believe in Christ, the Son of God. What about Muslims, Hindus, Native Americans, who thou shalt not kill? We committed genocide. We removed an entire race of people from the face of the earth. They had no concept of the Christ. Everybody's going to hell, except the people that get John 3:16. That seems a little exclusionary towards me. And my priest, Father Tim, who was 35 when I met him, said, yeah, I would look at the sentence before it, and that is, God is the Son of Man. God is inside of all of us. It's all tied together, like the Hindu saying Namaste. My divinity respects the divinity that's inside of you. God is the Son of Man. God's in me. I can affect my son's life by the way I behave on a day-to-day basis. I'm not comparing myself to God. I'm saying, you pull up to a toll booth and tell the guy to go F himself, that guy's going to go home and kind of be a jerk to his wife. You've affected this man's universe.
Right.
So think globally, act locally. God is the Son of Man.
Yeah.
So if he's the Son of Man, he's a flesh and bone like you and I. That's the Christ that I find fascinating. Who is this guy? Where was he for 15 years? Where's teenage Jesus? Where did he go? Nobody. He just went off the grid, right?
Right.
Like I just like now that there's a discussion, and I think that's very exciting right now for Christianity.
And being able to
the new Pope kissing homeless people's feet and things like that is, I mean, this is the most progressive Pope that there's ever been. It's unheard of.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And being able to take those big questions and wrap them in a little bit of humor really does kind of pull those walls down, I think, and allows us to talk about things that we're not comfortable with if we can kind of laugh about it a little bit.
Yeah,
cool.
I get a lot of, I have had my priests, plural, several different priests on my podcast, and Monsignor Jim Lasante, who's on Fox News all the time.
Yeah, the Jim Lasante episode was amazing. It was really good.
And you know what? I always try to play devil's advocate, and I put his feet to the fire for the agnostics and the atheists, saying, you heard it yourself. And I'm a believer, but if I'm an atheist, this is the biggest load of bull I've ever heard in my life. Explain that. And the guy stayed in the pocket and explained it. And I don't think people in power in the church, regardless of religion, have been willing to have that discussion and have a conversation about what gets put on the table by even rabble-rousers and non-believers. And I think the Catholic Church is going to increase in popularity by leaps and bounds because it's being progressive at an incredibly accelerated rate. And obviously what went down in the Catholic Church is abhorrent, and it's the most disgusting thing that's ever happened with the children and the priests being relocated. And that's not why the church is taking the stances that it's taking. I think it's the natural evolution of man, of we've done it this way, the hard-headed, no, you're going to hell, period, for centuries. Let's have a discussion. And that's what I love, is the willingness to just simply speak with me, not at me, with me about this. And I want to write about that.
I think you should. And when you do, I want you to come back on the show and we'll talk about that more in depth.
All right. It'll be about 10 years from now.
No, I'm going to hold
As
your feet.
Gertrude Stein once said, it takes a heap of loafing to write a book.
Jay Mohr, you've been extremely generous with your time, and I want to ask you one more question before you go, and that's this is a question for Nikki Cox. Who do you want to be when you grow up?
A quieter me.
A quieter you.
A quieter, gentler version of myself.
I love it.
You're hilarious. That's the best question my wife just threw into the back of the podcast. Aren't those answers fascinating?
They are. I love it. It's great.
Any guy listening, please don't. You can steal the book. I don't care. But No Wonder My Parents Drank. There's a quiz at the back of that book for you to give to your child if you have a son, or your father. You have to. It will blow your mind, your father's answers. He's not the guy you think. It'll really pave the way. And don't even buy the book. Just figure out a way to get the quiz out of. I'm not trying to sell books. We're long. You know the book industry. You get the advance and you stand around and you go, hey, do I get another nickel? Right. No, you don't. You're one of the anointed 20 that you don't. You get the advance, you're done. So take the quiz, give it to your dad. Tell your dad it's important to you. Give it to your son. My son took it when he was 5. I asked my 4-year-old son, the son I have with Nikki Cox, what kind of dad am I? And he just said like the sweetest things. I'm not going to say it now because it will sound precious and disgusting. But the things he said to me, I didn't know that's how he looked at me. So I encourage everybody, take that quiz. And I do answer all my own emails. And I'm so happy to have spoken with you, Hank. And you know what? I say this a lot on my podcast. I'm going to say it on yours. It's so rare once you hit like 40, you meet a new friend. And it's even rarer that you meet a new old friend. And that's how I feel with you.
Thank you so much, Jay. I feel the same way. And, we mentioned a couple of times we've been texting for a couple of weeks. And it's been It's been fantastic. Thank you, and thank you for the insight that you brought to the show, and let my audience get a window into a different style of creativity. I appreciate it.
Brother, text me any day, all day, whatever you want. My phone's off when I'm sleeping, so you'll never wake me up or bother me. Don't sweat it. I'm glad I know you, Hank, and I look forward to being friends for a really long time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
And
everybody. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend, even if you don't listen, hit the subscribe button and walk away.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. Get the
I'm
ranking
leaving
up.
now. I'm leaving now, Hank.
Thanks, Jay.